Only the RBC.
Test, test, test.
See, I wasn't like that. You just lost them.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Corporate Services meeting on June 13th. First item on the agenda is is there any additions to this agenda? Mr. Secretary?
No additions?
Motion to approve the agenda, please. Director Morrison, second by Director Lefebvre. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Mr. Secretary?
The adoption of the minutes for the April 11th meeting?
Moved by Director Jackson, seconded by Director Clement. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Business arising from the minutes?
No business arising from the minutes.
Moves us along to public input period. Looks like I'm off the hook again. So, if I'm not mistaken, we're going to move right on down to reports. Mr. Secretary.
Yes, in the first report from the finance manager regarding the 2017 Statement of Financial Information.
And I believe we have a recommendation. Okay, Director Jackson and Director Marcotte, any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. Mr. Secretary.
Number 2 from the manager of Human Resources regarding options to address income tax changes for 2019 board remuneration. And the report is for information.
All right. Anybody have any discussion points they want to bring up about that report? Director Jackson.
For me, and again, I'm a municipal director, not an area director like so many of you, I think I'm remunerated just fine, thank you very much. The difference, but what it's going to make in my salary is something minimal, and I would not feel good about asking more just to cover that small amount of money. So I would rather do the motion that we choose not to, I mean, I want to hear what everybody else has to say, but that we choose not to raise our own salaries.
Thank you very much. Director Davis, did you have your hand up?
I didn't, but I could go if you
Well,
like, or
no.
I can wait.
We'll go back to Director Kuhn. Thank you.
Well, we are not being asked for a decision here, or is this just for information, it says, or are we supposed to?
It's for information of the board, and there's options included in this report.
Well, I would suggest option 1, and my reason is very simple. I don't want to take a pay cut just because the tax regime by the federal government was changed. I don't think it's right. If there was a move to reduce, let's say, overall pay for the whole CVRD, including staff, then certainly I would agree with that. But if staff get advances as they do every year, I cannot see us taking a step backwards out of no fault of ours. It's not like we're producing less or we're doing less of a job or whatever. It's just the tax regime changed. Well, I don't see why I should take a pay cut for that. Thank you. So I'm moving for option number 1.
Second by Director Clement. Director Acton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I think our pay should be doubled, but obviously we're not going to be talking about that today, at least doubled. I think if you want a quality board, you should pay a board quite well, and I look around the table and I look at FCM or UBCM or any of these conferences, and there's a huge lack of demographics that's not here at the table. And that's, for example, you know, even at this table now, one of our youngest people is not going to be here next year because of the pay. So I would like to see incentives to encourage more of a representation of the public. So perhaps we could have expenses for childcare is one. And I would also like to see the remuneration be higher. You can only do this position if you have another income. And I'm talking mostly electoral areas, directors. I don't know what it's like to be a counselor, but you're doing evenings, mornings, it could be it's any time of day. So you can't, it's should not be considered a volunteer position.
Thank you. Director Morrison. Okay. Director Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I certainly agree with Director Acton. The days of this being certainly for an area director as a part-time job or a retirement project are long since over. Just look at our board meeting agenda of nearly 400 pages. And there's so many complex issues we have to deal with that it's just endless. Like the first year I did this, when I was trying to learn everything, it was just go, go, go all the time and endless, and I just couldn't keep that up. And it's been a challenge, certainly, as having just the one income. It's pretty well impossible to continue this way. So I would be certainly in favor of raising it to a level that would allow people to take 4 years out of their regular lives in order to help serve the community for what is not just decisions that affect the next 4 years, it's decisions that are going to affect the next 50.
Thank you, Director Walker.
I'll be supporting an option that fills in the vacuum left by the change in the federal tax thing. This is my 22nd year rattling around in local government, and I can tell you from when I started to where I am now, I'll support the fact that the workload is probably at least quadrupled. How's that for a word? And everybody's hounding us for more and more. We're taking on more. I've got more reports to read. On and on it goes. I don't fully understand the role of the electoral area directors. I have a fairly good idea of some of their complexities and extra work they do, but I know when I combined my municipal responsibilities plus the regional district responsibilities, if I wasn't retired, I couldn't do this. When I first got on council, I was working. I managed an operation with over 50 people in town here, and with a multi-million-dollar budget and responsible for an area, a forest area that included everything south of Nanaimo to Victoria to Souk and all the Gulf Islands. And I was able to handle that job and be a councillor. Quite frankly, there isn't a hope in hell of a person in that position today taking on the added responsibilities of being a councillor, let alone a councillor appointed to a regional district. It just couldn't be done. When I first got on council in 1990, I could do it on a 2-hour council meeting and probably 2 hours of preparation at night. And I see silence. Can anybody do that today? Not a chance. And if I was fast, I could probably do it in less. The preparation for sure. Most council meetings didn't go past 2 hours, and there was only 2 of them per month, and maybe a committee or something, and we could usually run that in the evening or something, or I took on some lesser committee responsibilities because I had other career responsibilities to look after. So when they change the income tax laws, I think we have to adjust. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Walker. Director Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was thinking that so option 1 will keep us at the same level, so that would not affect the income tax changes, then we would remain the same, correct?
That's the way I read the report, but
too.
perhaps staff could. Yes.
And I do, I'm speaking of demographics, or I also have another job, and it does get more difficult year after year in the amount of work that we have to do, but I'm not sure if I had a very good corporate position somewhere that I would give up 4 years of my job to come and sit around to be a counselor or a director. I think we're kidding ourselves if you think somebody's going to do that. So I'm not sure what brings another demographic and to this table, but I think that we do have a demographic here at the moment that is diverse, and we could always do with more, but I don't believe that paying a whole lot more, you're going to get people quitting their jobs for 4 years to do this. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Director Nicholson.
I'm sympathetic to some of the comments I've heard. I was thinking that sometimes your remuneration can be in the form of benefits, and I was wondering if we could hear the verbal report about the benefits before we continue this discussion any further.
Well, there is a motion on the floor, so we'd have to table the motion. So are you making that motion to table the motion?
Yep.
Do we have a seconder for that? Director Lefebvre? Any discussion on that? All those in favor? Opposed? Okay. We've officially tabled that.
Benefits for elected officials. So just as a way of background, currently staff and employees at the CVRD are covered under Manulife for their extended benefits plan. And Manulife Financial, the plan that we're part of, is quite comprehensive. So it is comparable to other plans for local government employees across the province. For the elected officials, 8 of you are covered under a very basic UBCM plan that is offered through Pacific Blue Cross. And that's been in place since 2015, with premiums for that coverage being paid by the CVRD. The reason that only 8 of you are covered is that benefit plans are offered to each of you in your own personal situations through a variety of measures. Some of you are municipal directors who have access to benefit plans through the municipal employer. Others have other employment with other employers and therefore are part of benefit plans with those employers or through spouses. And finally, there's always private coverage. So maybe if you run your own business or have always been part of a private plan, you may have elected to continue with that instead of participating in the UBCM plan offering that came through the CVRD. So coverage for elected officials is very challenging. And it has to do with the fact that insurance is a business and they offer a product and we only have the option to buy what they offer or not, basically. We don't have a whole lot of control. And they run their business on the pooled risk model. So the whole reason why they can offer insurance is because of spreading the risk over groups. The way that they do that is that they ensure that they have a large enough group size for any one benefit plan, and that they have compulsory enrollment in that plan so that they don't have over time people with the option of not participating because that undermines the pooled risk. They also require, especially in the case of elected officials, commitment for the entire term. And so this concept of term versus temporary employment or ongoing employment is significant to insurers because they spread the risk not only over a large group, but also over time. And so elected officials are considered temporary employees, both in the fact that they're only elected for a 4-year period, and also that depending on other political activity, they may not even finish a 4-year term. So, and that makes them very difficult. Most insurers will not include them in an employee benefits plan group. The other part that's difficult is that the definition of how much time an elected official puts in their job is entirely discretionary. And while we hear a lot about how much time you all put in, there's nothing governing how much time you put in. And as a result, the concept of being actively at work cannot be guaranteed, which means that coverages for things like life insurance, accidental death and disability, and long and short-term disability are not available through insurers because they cannot, there's no control over whether or not you're actively at work. So for these reasons, it's very difficult for an insurer to offer a plan that an employer can participate in for an elected official. So then, how did we get some coverage through UBCM, through the Pacific Blue Cross? So UBCM has two different options for elected officials. If a local government has all of its benefits for employees and staff through Pacific Blue Cross as their carrier, then the elected officials have a choice. They can participate in a standard employee benefits plan, or they can participate in an exempt staff employee benefits plan. But the CVRD does not have its extended benefits through Pacific Blue Cross. We have our extended benefits through Manulife. And as a result, the only option available is this very basic plan that some of you are currently participating in, which offers very, very little, actually. As I hear from the people in the room who have to rely on that plan, it is not a comprehensive plan. It is sort of a token plan. So how could we possibly go about improving the basic UBCM plan was a question that came to me. And so just so you know, prior to every election, UBCM does go back to Pacific Blue Cross and evaluates and negotiates improvements to that basic plan for elected officials. New enrollment for whatever they negotiate happens usually the month or so after the election. Again, it's based on an elected official committing to that coverage for the entire term. And when I talked to the representative at UBCM who manages the benefits and is going to market or going to Pacific Blue Cross to do these negotiations, she indicated that she was willing to receive feedback from those of you who are on the plan to help direct her ask of Pacific Blue Cross around the benefits plan. So following the meeting, I will make sure that all of you get that person's contact information so that you can email or call her and let her know what your requests would be for improvements to that plan. She has already identified that both dental and vision benefits are in need of upgrades on that plan, so she had already indicated to me she'd be asking for those kinds of improvements. But I've also heard from various members about different other benefits that are subpar in their estimation, and it would be good to give this individual your feedback so that she can take it forward when she renegotiates the UBCM plan. But beyond that, the CVRD has very little very few options in terms of providing benefit coverage to elected officials. And that's the information update, unless there's any questions.
Thank you very much. Director Sebring was on the speaker's list for the motion that was tabled. Do you wish to?
I'll
Then Director
like to speak to this, then I'll come back and speak on the other one when we get back to it. And not really speaking on this, but we tabled based on the benefits plan, and the next item on the agenda is a verbal report on the impacts of the payroll tax, which is what we were talking about. Perhaps we could get that before we go back to the original motion as well. That's all I wanted to say.
Am I understanding those comments correctly, or is the payroll tax something a little different?
Payroll tax is something a little different. So the tax changes to the Income Tax Act are a federal legislation change, and that's what's impacting your take-home pay.
Oh, okay.
And the payroll tax is the provincial government's effort in terms of making up for the decrease and elimination of MSP premiums.
I'll rescind my request. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Nicholson, I've seen one more hand on this side. Who was it? Director Morrison? Okay. Director Nicholson.
Thank you. I was wondering, we use Manulife here for our employees. When do you take a look at your insurance provider?
We like to do it on a fairly regular cycle because there's a lot of activity and changes in the benefits plan this year related to bargaining. We have postponed the market exercise until next year. So next year we would normally go to market with our benefits agent and survey the market and make decisions around whether to stay with our current carrier or move. So.
Follow up?
So it just seems to me that that might be one more thing to consider when you're doing that.
Certainly, we can include that in the analysis. Yeah.
Okay, Director Morrison.
Thank you. I would have to say that this isn't any new information that Ms. Mohan shared with us. I have a little bit of a background in this. I was life accidental death and dismemberment, and the other category licensed up until a few years ago. And I'm really challenged with our approach to this, in that I think we have more muscle in this discussion than we may be playing with, so to speak. We have employees that are here on short terms that are covered. We've got, you know, I know that in general firefighters have pretty darn good coverage, those that are enrolled in programs. And I was absolutely disgusted at the nature of the UBCM plan. I can't believe we actually paid for it. So I would like to see us be more insistent with when we go to market on this. Whether it's a different classification of what elected officials are viewed as. I know we've gone from the 3-year term to a 4-year term, but that doesn't seem to factor into this discussion. I think that it should. We're signing up for a 4-year gig, and that's a significant commitment, and it can be longer than a lot of employees may stay with an organization. So I'd really like to see more done, much along the lines of what Director Nicholson has said, when we go to market and we're looking for a package for the employees. I think that there should be a way in which we can be tied in with that. So I thank you for the information, and I think we need to do more if we're going to attract a different group of people to sit around this table. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Morrison. I have Director Clement.
I was just curious to know if the premiums are covered through the CVRD, what does that work out to be at a dollar amount per director?
I don't have that information available for you at this time, so it's in the few $100s a month, basically. Okay. But I don't know exactly. It depends a little bit on the individual's status, whether they're a single coverage or a couple or a family coverage, et cetera. So it's not the same for every director, and it will depend on income as well for life and disability benefits, those kinds of things. So.
Thank you. And Mr. Kieber has a remark for that question, too.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I don't actually have the dollar figure, but when we did roll it out, or when we did this review, I'm going to say maybe 4 or 5 years ago, the costs that came up were approximately 16.5% increase when we added benefits. So that's was the overall impact that was determined, and that was that the board approved a number of years ago.
Okay, I have Director Davis.
Sorry, I just need some clarification
okay.
on that statement. 16% of the gross pay?
Of the elected officials' gross pay, yes.
Okay.
Director Davis.
Thank you. Yeah, that was because it went from ridiculously low at 24,000 a year up to 30. But I did ask Ms. Mohan about certain things like an employee assistance program, and as far as I know, we don't have access to one at all, so no counseling or any of those other sorts of things are available to us. And I guess that's because we're technically not employees, which seems weird to me. And as was brought up a few minutes ago, short-term employees here have full benefits that are far more, even if it seems to me like this could be treated as a 4-year contract. But I know contract positions have a lot better benefits too.
Thank you. Director Acton, and then Director Jackson after that.
I'm just curious if there's been a discussion about creating some added benefits where the CVRD would cover different costs so that we could make it a little bit more attractive, not just buy insurance. Or if people deny the insurance, if it's $350 a month, could you have the option of taking that as pay, or could you have the option of expensing childcare, for example? And I mentioned childcare. My kids are almost old enough not to have childcare soon, but I do after taxes, I take home around $2,000, and it costs me $2,000 a month for childcare. So in essence, it's actually costing me money because my husband, I'm no longer a dependent. So, and it's not about me at this table. It's about other people being able to be here if they wanted to be.
Thank you. Director Jackson.
I'm actually quite shocked to hear what's being said around this table. I know at the city, we've got a pretty good dental. I covered for that. If I need counseling, I don't even have to tell them. I just walk into the office and the counseling office, and they're there for me if I need it. I'm shocked that you electoral directors don't have the same kinds of medical and coverage and support that we do in the city, and I would encourage whoever is going to look into upgrading these benefits to please do so, because you need them.
Thank you. Director Stone.
So we went through this, and I was shocked too that of what's able to be offered to the directors, because municipally, council didn't have the political will in Ladysmith to move forward on it, but the same benefits were available to our councillors as were our senior staff. The exact same benefits packages were available. Some of our council opted into those based on paying themselves, but the same packages were available, and they weren't a few $100s a month, and they have full medical, dental. So I would encourage staff to maybe circle around with some of the municipal staff and see what that difference might be. At the time, it was, it was only a couple $100s, but we'd already gone through the remuneration review and raised the remuneration for mayor and council, again, to frankly what seems like a paltry amount for the amount of work that everybody does, but was, sort of lifted somewhat. And on top of that, there wasn't the political will to throw the benefits into that with the municipality paying for it. But for those that do pay for benefits, it's only a couple $100s a month, and they get all the same benefits as our senior staff do. So I would just encourage maybe the staffs of Duncan and Ladysmith to connect with CVRD staff and see what they're doing that's different, that makes it so much more attainable.
Thank you, Director Stone. Anybody else? So staff has probably heard a common message, and don't suppose we need to formalize that in any shape or form, do we?
Well, I guess my response would only just be that the last time this was looked into was in 2015, just prior to when a certain number of you enrolled in the UBCM plan. So we have not been to market on our benefits carrier since 2015. It doesn't make much sense, given the comments that are being made here around it being a term of 4 years. The timing makes sense to do at the beginning of the next term with a new, like with the, whoever gets elected for that term. And certainly that coincides with our plans to go to market with the benefits plan. But it has been looked into as recently as late 2014 as to whether or not Manulife was willing to offer us a plan.
Okay, so thank you. So with that, we can move back to R2. Sorry?
So I'm not clear. Does that mean staff will look into it or not?
What I've just heard is that staff will look into it when it comes up to go back to market.
Correct. That would be my
At the
intention.
beginning of the next term.
So
Director
that will
Nicholson.
happen before the end of the fiscal year, so it could be incorporated into the following budget, or?
I'd have to, so there's a timing issue sometimes with when you go to market with your shop your benefits plan, and they want a certain calendar year of experience to look at, and so I'm not sure the timing will coincide exactly, but we can certainly attempt it.
Mr. Carruthers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to suggest that you might want to pass a resolution directing staff, because it wouldn't be normal that we would add that necessarily to the criteria. Our benefits package has always been for staff, so if this board is interested in us adding elected official coverage to our criteria when we're going out to do the market evaluation, I would prefer to have that backed up in a resolution, and then that stays on the system, and we'll ensure that gets done when we go out and do that work.
Thank you.
I
I
have
think
a
that sounds like a good idea. Director Jackson?
I wanted to say that, at least for the electoral area directors, because the municipal directors probably already have something. And so my concern would be for the electoral area directors to be able to at least match the benefits that I receive from my municipality. And I move that recommendation just to get it on the table, by the way.
Mr. Crothers?
No, I was just,
Oh.
Director Jackson had it.
Yes, Mr. Chair, it
Okay,
would
we have
actually,
some-
actually be more appropriate before anybody seconds that. Right now, we're actually on R2, and we've just brought forward the benefit information. We have an R3, so that we can find this in the minutes, and in the future, it'd be better if you just hold off for any motion on benefits till we get to R3.
Okay.
Because
Good
you
thing I
had-
wasn't paying
Because we had just asked that the information on benefits be brought forward into R2, which we've just heard from.
Okay. Clear as mud now.
So, Mr. Chair, if you're finished with hearing from the benefit information, it'd be appropriate to take the previous motion from the table and back on the floor.
Moved by Director Walker, second by Director Sebring. I have Director Stone had his hand in the air. So Director Sebring, you were first on the list
Thank you.
before we got,
Just as a point of clarification, going back to before we had the discussion on the benefits, Director Yam-Denardo mentioned that option one, the way she reads it, doesn't include any changes, and that's not my read on this. I mean, this does include a change in terms of the cost of the regional district, because the pay for the people around this table would be adjusted to compensate for the change in the federal income tax.
that's the way
So
number one reads. Yeah.
that is the motion that's before us. I just wanted to clarify, there is a slight cost. What that is, I don't know, but just so we're all on the same page.
Yeah.
That's all.
And it is in the table in the recommendation. Yeah. Okay, Director Jackson.
Having listened to everybody around the table, I am willing to support option one.
And that is the motion that's alive on the table right now.
Mr.
Yes,
Chair,
Mr. Secretary.
just for the benefit of the directors, and especially the people that are watching on streaming, I'll just read what it is because they may not know what option one is. To adjust remuneration in a fashion that maintains net pay at the same level it would have been without the legislative changes.
Director Walker.
Yeah, and I'd just like to say, and that's a minimum increase, that I think when I read the calculation here, that's assuming that none of us earn money elsewhere. And if you earn money elsewhere, if I just get the standard tax deduction of my regional district remuneration, I pay the piper next spring when I do my budget, so I have to at least double it because I have some other income, as probably 2/3 of us here do. So this just assumes that that's your sole income as I see these numbers. So it is an absolute minimum, and we're not hitting the taxpayers very hard here.
Yes, that is correct, Mr. Walker, I think. And because I know that I have to remit extra for the other two salaries that I make besides my regular salary, right? So I can see having to go and add to that number again. Anybody else with a comment to the motion? All those in favor? Opposed? That motion's carried. Thank you. Now we can move along to R3.
Yes, Mr. Chair, in R3, it was the report regarding information on benefit plans for elected officials. You heard that information earlier, so it would be appropriate if you have any motions to make right now.
Mr. Carruthers did have a motion fashioned here, so can we let him read that out for us?
Yes, for the committee's consideration that staff be directed to include benefits for elected officials when developing criteria for employee benefits market review.
Director
Or
Jack?
wording to that effect. I'll let my staff.
Director Jackson's moving it. Director Stone, second.
Pass it.
Director Sebring, did you have a comment?
No, I was going to second, but I'm fine.
Thank you. Any discussion, Director Stone?
Just by a show of hands from the municipal directors, which municipal directors do have coverage provided by the municipalities? So Duncan and North Cowichan, not Lake Cowichan or Ladysmith. Okay. And are those premiums paid by your municipalities? Okay. Yeah, we got to get out of the dark ages. Call ourselves progressive. Thanks.
Director Davis?
Yeah, I just heard Director Walker say that they're taxable benefits.
As a taxable benefit. Anybody else? Then I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
And the fourth report from the Manager of Human Resources regarding the impacts of the 2019 payroll tax.
Ms. Mohan?
So I had an inquiry, oh, can you hear me? Yes, okay. Inquiry about what the sort of net effect of the provincial government's announcement of an incoming payroll tax, I think they're calling it a health employers health tax or something, what that would look like for the CVRD. And so I've prepared this table. I've shown it over a 4-year period going back to 2017, largely because that's when we first, or that's the last time we had full MSP premiums, right? And so the MSP premium changes started this year in 2018, and then we're not quite sure, but because they haven't scheduled it, but the provincial government has indicated that they plan to eliminate MSP premiums by 2020, but they haven't actually formalized an announcement on how much more or what the rate of discount or reduction is going to be between now and then. And so it could be eliminated in 2019, it could be the same as this year with an elimination in 2020, or it could be anything in between. And that's kind of where the uncertainty comes from in any of these numbers, is not knowing what the plan is for 2019 and 2020 on the MSP premiums. So the payroll, and you can see that in the premium amount column. So we used to pay about $288,000 in premiums. This year, the bill was cut in half, or will be cut in half. Next year, somewhere in between 0 and that half, and hopefully, as promised in 2020, no MSP premiums. The payroll tax for an employer our size is going to be 1.95%, and it will come into effect in January of 2019. And based on approximately $17 million payroll, which is our payroll right now, or as of the last SOFI, so that could change. But according to that, you can see that the tax amount is going to be $331,500. And then, so the total between the two, the MSP premiums and the payroll tax, is shown in the final column. And so you can see there's a range in 2019. It could range anywhere from $331,000 to $475,500, depending on what they do with MSP in 2019. And then from 2020 on, assuming no MSP, it'll be around $331,000, not accounting for increases in payroll. So, you know, over that implementation period, going from full MSP to no MSP and going from no payroll tax to full payroll tax, it could cost us up to $87,000 over that 4-year period, or it could save us, you know, $60,000 or $57,000. So it's a little bit hard to say, but that's the range of numbers we're working with. And then just as a comparison going forward, you know, the 331 is ongoing into the future is about $43,500 annually more than what we were paying in MSP premiums. So it will be a net hit to us in, yeah, from 2020 going forward of about that much. So. And that's the update.
Thank you. I have Director Stone and Director Lefebvre.
Well, I said it without the microphone. Regressive tax regime to another. So we move from payroll taxes to property taxes. Instead of taxing income in a sliding scale that really hits the people that can maybe afford it more. Our low-income seniors that own a home will now be expected to absorb the MSP savings they got through property taxes. And many of those people are renting are also going to see those property tax increases. So essentially, they're just moving the shells around and taking the money out of the same pockets they were before, but it's hidden now on a property tax bill so they can blame their local government rather than an MSP bill that directs the ire at the province. So, you know, disappointing, but I think we all saw it coming. You know, I expected more from a progressive provincial government, but hopefully, you know, you hear the lobbying from the larger municipalities especially. They're talking millions of dollars in impact. You know, when they have a payroll 10 times that amount, that's $500,000 every year. So hopefully they'll see their way to look at alternatives. But I really wish, just from a, you know, a citizen's point of view, that they had looked at income tax as a way to make that change, not putting it on local governments, which then goes into housing. And I know that everybody around here knows from our time at conferences and stuff that we don't have enough of the tax share it is, and sort of sneaking a tax through that actually impacts. And we're not talking about the small to medium businesses either that are being hit by that payroll tax, and the viability that it causes, or the impacts on the viability it causes, and the raises to minimum wages, which I 100% accept. But if you add the minimum wage increases on top of a payroll tax, you're really putting the boots to medium business and small business, which do drive a lot of employment in this province. So hopefully the provincial government will kind of see the light of day on it and maybe look at higher income individuals as being the people that can afford to pay into that system to get rid of MSP.
Do I smell a UBCM resolution?
Yeah. Ouch.
Director Lefebvre.
Thank you. I was just, from your graph, we're going to be paying 1.95% as a payroll tax. Does that number, where does that number change? I don't know if you know this. Does it change if you have a small business? Where does it change, and what does it change to?
I think it's around 2 million in payroll. So if you're over 2 million in payroll, then you pay the larger amount of payroll tax.
Right.
And so for payrolls up to 2 million, there's a graduated increase in the percentage of tax. So up until that's the maximum.
Thank you.
Director Stone, to clarify that response.
Yeah,
Director
just,
Walker.
you know, the small businesses like me won't be paying it. You know, I have 3 employees plus myself, so we won't be paying it. But it's those, you know, medium businesses, the small businesses that are aspiring to become medium businesses with 30, 40 employees, our light industrial businesses, those kinds of businesses are the ones that probably can least afford it, and are property taxpayers. So no matter what, the small business person through property tax is going to get hit one way or another. And I'd like to see, you know, curiosity moving forward. What's 1% of taxation in the regional district? So is that a 1% tax increase for the average homeowner? Like, I understand what the average homeowner will pay if it's 330, you know, 1,000 per year. But I guess, you know, we're talking about only 50,000 a year. So I guess in the regional district that won't be a lot on everybody's property tax bill, a couple bucks. But still, it's tough to swallow.
And I can say from my perspective too that you'll see an increase in the price of a head of lettuce. So you're going to pay for it in a lot of different ways. So Director Walker, then Director Morrison.
A couple of weeks ago, I attended the library board meeting, and we're all part of VIRL. And the finance officer said he's starting to build the budget, and he said, building into the budget, he's building almost a 2% increase on this tax alone. And we'll see that at the September meeting. But he just gave us a heads up that that's the effect it will have for VIRL. And VIRL is paid for by property tax owners.
Director Morrison, then Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for the committee's information, the AVICC executive had their first face-to-face executive meeting following our convention, which seems like it was a long time ago. But one of the items for discussion was Resolution ER3, which was an emergency resolution at the convention, and it's the new employer health tax. And I won't read it out, but essentially they're after UBCM. They're sending letters, and I believe the executive voted to also send a letter directly to the province, and the feedback is that that they have further discussion, they delay implementation, and that they work with UBCM, because I completely agree with what Director Stone says, and that everybody else at local government recognizes it, that it's just changed one tax regime with another, and it's no more progressive. So thank you.
So what you're saying is AVICC is on it? Okay. Thank you, Director Stone.
Just another note, we did have under our collective bargaining some benefits lifts and costs associated with that from that reduction in MSP. I believe we did a benefit lift as part of, they wanted part of,
We did, but we did not connect the two.
I know, but just
we did
in the back of my
anticipate-
mind,
we knew
I'm
by that time.
recognizing, and
Yeah,
all of us
yeah.
did to a certain degree, one way or another, you know, look at some other benefits as we had those MSP savings. So, you know, there is a little bit more built in there in this whole MSP discussion as well, so. And again, not connected. There's no
Well, not
relationship
formally.
between the two, but it's recognized that I think we did a bit of a benefit lift to compensate for that savings, but.
Thank you very much. I have nobody left on the list, so that was for information. So we can move right along to unfinished business, Mr. Secretary. Nothing there.
No unfinished business.
No new business. Question period. Nobody in the audience. I got lucky again. No closed session. We have adjournment. Moved by Director Morrison, seconded by Director Yanni DiNardo.
Sorry.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Closed session at 5? Closed session